Good morning. I'm Jodi, Calahoo Stonehouse, MLA for Edmonton Rutherford, and the NDP critic for Environment, Parks, and Climate Resilience. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Alberta NDP House Leader Christina Gray and Edmonton Beverly Clairview MLA Peggy Wright. I acknowledge that we are gathered here on the beautiful lands of traditional Treaty 6 territory, and I also recognize the Métis people who share a deep connection with these lands. Albertans deserve leaders who are upfront and tell the truth about their plans for the future. But what we're seeing today is a premier who says one thing and then does the complete opposite. Let me be clear. The UCP was dishonest with Albertans during the election. We talked about Danielle Smith's hidden agenda during this campaign, pursuing expensive and reckless ideas like gambling Albertans' pensions or handling monies to negligent companies. Danielle Smith has refused to debate these ideas during the campaign. She claimed, "No, we won't do any of these things." She claimed they were, quote, "not in our campaign." Well, surprise, surprise, 6 weeks after the election, and they show up in her minister's mandate letters. Only the language they use is deeply coded in an attempt to further hide the government's intentions. That's why today my colleagues and I are offering a brand new translation. We translate the UCP spin into Alberta's reality. First, the mandate letter for Energy Minister Brian Jean, we see this line, and I quote, "Developing a strategy to effectively incentivize reclamation of inactive legacy oil and natural gas sites and to enable future drilling while respecting the principle of polluter pay," end quote. This is coded language for the next steps in Danielle Smith's R-Star giveaway to negligent polluters. In this mandate, inactive sites means environmental liabilities held by active and solvent companies. And incentivize means you, the taxpayers, will pay. It is clear that taxpayers will now be paying off environmental liabilities of private industry, liabilities that they are legally responsible for. Instead of enforcing the law and fully upholding the polluter pay principle, Albertans will pick up the tab yet once again. Let me be clear, Alberta. Danielle Smith is paying back her friends and corporate industry with your money. She didn't campaign on this plan, but she's doing it anyway. If you disagree, you need to let her know. Stand up and join us in pushing back against the R-Star plan. Thank you, and I'm going to pass things over to my colleague, Christina.
Thank you, Jodi. And as Jodi said, these are bad ideas that the UCP refused to campaign on, and they're pursuing anyways. Translation services are exactly what Albertans need when it comes to the UCP and their hidden agenda, especially when it comes to something as important as retirement security. We all know that the UCP is obsessed with meddling with Alberta's pensions and pulling out of the CPP. That's why I was deeply concerned when I saw the mandate letter for Finance Minister Nate Horner and found this line, quote, "Releasing the Alberta Pension Plan report and consulting with Albertans on its findings to determine whether a referendum should be held to establish an Alberta pension plan that will increase pension benefits for seniors, reduce premiums for workers, and protect the pension interests and benefits for all Albertans." There are several problems with this statement. First, the report the UCP mentions has been trapped in the minister's office since 2021. What kind of biased rewriting has it been going through? Every single independent analysis of this idea has proven that pulling Alberta out of the CPP will cost more and give less to Albertans, while also destabilizing pension security here in Alberta and across Canada. It will risk Albertans' benefits for no good reason. Recent studies have proved that the Canada Pension Plan is the best managed pension plan in the world. Any report that says otherwise is a fraud. Second, the letter mentions words like consultation and referendum, but the UCP refused to talk to Albertans about this during the election, when they easily could have had this conversation or even scheduled a referendum. Why didn't they? Because according to all public surveys, including the government's own Fair Deal panel report, The vast majority of Albertans oppose this plan. I'll do the minister's job for him. According to a Leger survey conducted in May 2023, during the election, I might add, a whopping 79% of Albertans opposed removing Alberta from the CPP. That's a majority of supporters for both the NDP and the UCP political parties. Finally, the letter mentions protecting pension interests of Albertans. The UCP has never protected any pension. They ran roughshod over teachers' pensions and interfered in every public sector pension that they manage. The fact is, Danielle Smith has no mandate to interfere in Alberta's retirement savings. Your pensions, including your CPP, belong to you. And the NDP will fight to keep it that way every single day. Now I'd like to invite Peggy to offer more translation services.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you, Jodi. Like my colleagues, I too am deeply concerned by these plans to gamble with pensions and give taxpayer money to polluters. Unfortunately, these aren't the only bad ideas in the mandate letters that the UCP didn't campaign on. In that same letter to the finance minister, he is also tasked with, and I quote, exploring the feasibility and advantages of establishing an Alberta revenue agency to collect all provincial tax revenues and developing a detailed strategy for its implementation should our government choose to pursue it. And once again, like my colleagues already said, there was zero discussion of this during the election campaign, none. Here's what this will mean in Alberta. According to leading economist Trevor Toome, this plan will cost Albertans more than $500 million annually. That's a huge chunk of change that won't go towards our schools or hospitals, but instead will go towards hiring 5,000 new tax collectors. And we know this because former Finance Minister Travis Taves told us this at committee a few months before the election. But these staff would not be replacing the work of the Canada Revenue Agency, they would be duplicating it. You still have to file federal taxes. Only now, under the UCP, you'll file them twice. More paperwork for every single worker, every single business owner. It's a plan for reckless spending, big government expansion and more red tape, and I can't believe I'm saying this as a New Democrat. This is not conservatism. This is catastrophe. Albertans want their government to be focused on lowering the cost of living and fixing health care, not rewriting another set of tax codes. The Alberta NDP will oppose this multi-billion-dollar boondoggle and fight to ensure that not a single cent of taxpayer dollars are spent on making Albertans file their taxes twice. In short, all of these plans we mentioned are expensive, reckless, and do not have public support. Danielle Smith and the UCP hid these plans from Albertans during the election, and as such, again, they have no mandate to implement them. All Albertans should be furious and calling on their MLAs to stop these plans and be honest for once. Thank you, and we will now take your questions.
Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9. Please state your name and outlet and who you'd like to speak to or direct your question to, and we'll start with questions in the room.
Hi there, Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta Day. So when you're talking about this language, it's sort of couched in terms like, we're not going to do anything, we're going to look at this report and then see if it's worthwhile going to a referendum or sort of assess it through the report. What if the report comes back and it shows what you're saying, that it's a total schmozzle, and they're not going to go ahead with it? Why do you think that they're going to go ahead with it regardless of what the report says, or that they're going to torque the report?
Absolutely. So the UCP were dishonest during the campaign and not even wanting to have this conversation, and in fact accused the official opposition of promoting misinformation, when here we are 6 weeks later and the topics they said that they weren't interested in pursuing, that it wasn't part of the campaign, now it appears in the mandate letter. I'm extremely concerned about the reports they're bringing forward and the bias that they will show, given the UCP's obsession with doing things like pulling out of the CPP. And even when we talk about that pension piece, the language in the mandate letter already puts the conclusion of the report into that language. It talks about how the sky will be blue and the sun will be shining and we will all become millionaires. But that's not what will happen, and instead they are trying to further their agenda, which includes fighting with Ottawa and furthering their own corporate interests. And so, no, I don't believe that we will see an unbiased report that will accurately lay out all the facts. I'm very concerned about what type of report we will get, given the government's clear agenda from the very beginning and their refusal to have an honest discussion about it.
And they did say it could be worth going to a referendum. You had cited some opinion research that shows Albertans are opposed. So do you think that there's something in this report that's coming forward that would change their mind? Do you think Albertans would reject it in a referendum? Why would a referendum be a bad thing if they're opposed?
So the government is spending a lot of time and effort on an unpopular idea that would increase risk for Alberta families, that would increase pension risk across Canada, and that we have seen from legislative committees to pension experts that it will cost more money. Now, this report that they've had since 2021. And yet they still weren't prepared to release it ahead of the election. And I think that shows a lack of confidence on the part of the UCP, or a desire to further edit that report to get it into the better spot where they want it to be. So the dishonesty we saw from the election means that I do not trust this UCP government to put forward an unbiased piece of information. And the bottom line is, this is something deeply unpopular. Albertans do not want their pensions messed with. They do not want polluters to get taxpayer money to clean up their liabilities, and they do not want to file their taxes twice. All of this is deeply unpopular, and the UCP government wouldn't campaign on it and needs to abandon these plans.
Thank you. We'll go online now to questions on then we'll go to Dean Bennett. Dean, your line is open.
You as well. You were just saying then that the CPP plan, it's unpopular, it doesn't make any sense, it wouldn't make financial sense. So why do you, based on that premise, why do you think the government's pursuing it?
So we've seen from the start of the UCP government under Jason Kenney in 2019 a real fighting against Ottawa theme to how they've pursued policy objectives, beginning with the Fair Deal panel report. That included some of these items, included pulling out of the RCMP, and I believe that they've continued along this path because they find political benefit of fighting with Ottawa and being angry. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they've continued down this path. I also think that when it comes to pensions and starting an Alberta pension plan, that there's a real risk of political interference or political motivations influencing how that money becomes invested. Perhaps there's motivation there. But that's certainly one of the reasons why I think it's a bad idea and should not move any further than what has happened so far. The official opposition, we've introduced private members' bills, and we've debated this at committee and in the legislature, and the government stubbornly continues to pursue this agenda over and over and over.
Do you have a follow-up, Dean?
Thanks. Yeah, so you mentioned Trevor Tombe in your newser, and if I'm interpreting him correctly in a Graham Thompson column, he's saying there could be a short-term or a benefit to an Alberta pension plan in lower premiums, perhaps. I think he said 1% or something like that, which doesn't mean he says it outweighs the other concerns. But where does the NDP stand on this then? Which reports are you citing, and do you believe there might even be any kind of a benefit in terms of lower premiums or anything like that?
So the Alberta NDP has, in studying this issue, gone back to the legislative committee that originally reviewed this issue, as well as the reports by Keith Ambikshire and the work that he did researching Alberta pulling out of the pension plan. And we also know that a lot of the initial opinions when it comes to the pension plans are based on the idea that Alberta has a younger population than the rest of Canada. We need to acknowledge that the number of seniors here in Alberta is set to double by 2046, that demographics can change, what's happening in a province can change, and that they are trying to pursue something that would increase risk and potentially move all of the liabilities here onto our province, regardless of cost, is incredibly concerning. And fundamentally, I think the important message from this press conference is these are all issues that not only would the UCP refuse to campaign on during the election, but when we tried to expose their hidden agenda, that these were policies they were planning to pursue, Premier Danielle Smith referred to it as misinformation and assured the voting public that they were not moving forward with these items. 6 weeks later, all 3 of them appear in mandate letters. That level of dishonesty is striking, and we wanted to highlight what these changes could mean to the Alberta public.
Thank you. We'll just do one more pass for questions. Any more in the room? Nope. Just one more pass on the phone. If you're *9 if you're on the phone, raise hand if you're on Zoom. Seeing none, that concludes our press conference for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.